I think it set to do three things and it succeeded. I think it really was trying to reset the tone of U.S. diplomacy and reassure partners and allies about the U.S.'s unique ability to play a leadership role, which I think is especially important after the chaos in Kabul in the last month or so. And the third thing that Joe Biden was seeking to do was, as you mentioned, really challenge China, but without being overly antagonistic, without taking the sort of almost xenophobic tones that his predecessor took. And on all three scorecards, I think Biden did really well to, as best he could, use the UNGA platform to reassess and essentially reset the tone of how the U.S. is viewed around the world.
Do you think that there was something that he should have said that he did not? What was missing?
Essentially, maybe he could have gone into Afghanistan a little bit more. I think he did well to touch on it in the fact that he didn't shy away from, whatever happened in Kabul, and he sought to then pivot towards more global challenges, more issues where the U.S. can show a little bit more of the competence that I think the world saw was missing in the chaotic evacuation. So I think that could have been helpful. I think it was also, interesting to see how he didn't name certain adversaries. So in nowhere in his speech did he directly mention the Chinese or the Russians. Instead, he spoke about values. He spoke about the way that the U.S. can be a marshaling force for the world. And I think what he was trying to do in that was appeal to the other member states around the UN, not the Chinese, not the Russians, to say you should partner with us, not with them.
Yeah, and that idea of being in one grouping but not the other, Ashish, I mean, it's something we've heard from Xi Jinping. We heard it again in his pre-recorded speech that the world should not be divided up into these blocks. But we kind of heard something similar from Biden too. And it's not really realistic, is it? Because the world is increasingly being divided up into these blocks.
It is, and I think it's unavoidable at this stage to think about these sort of silos that are developing. We talked about the Indo-Pacific. There's the Quad meeting later in the week as well. Obviously, which will be focused, in large part about how to counter China in the Indo-Pacific region. But I think it's also, important to keep in mind one of the key messages, and I think one of the last messages that Joe Biden ended his speech on, which was his willingness to work with Beijing. He said that the U.S. isn't trying to go it alone, isn't seeking a Cold War, and that it's important to cooperate where possible to deal with the shared challenges of COVID and climate change. And I think that shows that if the U.S. can balance this sort of high wire act of trying to antagonize, challenge the Chinese without going overboard, but then also work with them, cooperate and compartmentalize on areas where they know they'll need Beijing's cooperation. Obviously, if that succeeds, that'll be a net positive for the world. But it's the delivery on that obviously will take years to really see.